Om Tavagatamritam Tapta Jivanam Kaviviridhitam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatanam Bhuvigananti Bhuridajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Last Friday we finished the birthday celebration of Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar, and we also just had our birthday celebration. And actually for me it's Monday. You'll be seeing this on Friday through the miracle of modern technology, but today is actually the Tithi, the actual official day of Ramakrishna's birthday according to the lunar calendar, when the main celebration is done in all of our centers in India. And right now is probably the sannyas ceremony. What time will it be in India now? Anyhow, the following Thakur's birthday celebration, early the next morning, they begin the sannyas, taking the vows of sannyasa for the new monks who will be getting their final vows. So the very auspicious and very holy time. Anyhow, this is still the chapter, the Master's birthday celebration at Dakshineshwar, but it's actually later in the month. This is March 29th, and previous to this was March, I think, 11th. So this is over a week after his birthday, 11th to 29th, 2 weeks. The Master had taken a little rest after his noon meal when a few devotees arrived from Calcutta, among them Amrita and the well-known singer of the Brahmo Samaj, Trailokya. We met Trailokya last time also. You'll remember that he came for Thakur's birthday. And Thakur, of course, was very, very fond of him. And even the others got annoyed. I mentioned about the book that he wrote, or article, whatever it was, and the others got annoyed. Thakur, he didn't pay any attention to these things. He kind of teased them a little bit about it and said, oh, so you say this way and that way and everything. But anyhow, they despite that, they had a nice relationship. Trailokya, regardless of what he thought with the views of the Brahmos towards Sri Ramakrishna and everything, he had a genuine love and affection for Sri Ramakrishna. So Thakur was always happy when he came. He composed beautiful songs, and he had apparently had a beautiful singing voice also. Rakhal was not feeling well. The Master was greatly worried about him and said to the devotees, "You see, Rakhal is not well. Will soda water help him? What am I to do now? Rakhal, please take the prasad from the Jagannath temple." We find also that when Rakhal went to Vrindavan, was that before this or after this? Must be after this, huh? Later, after this. That Thakur was he felt sick there, he was very worried. Thakur had a theory. It wasn't just a theory, this was part of his own deep conviction and who knows from some experience he had, but that those special souls, the avatars or the Ishvara Kotis or the Nityasiddhas, whatever, these special souls could get an awakening if they went back to the place that was connected with their previous lifetime or whatever special aspect of God they came from, or some historical connection, whatever, that could awaken something within them that would cause them to remember the previous lifetime and see everything is unreal, whatever, and give up the body. This was why Sri Ramakrishna, he never went to the holy city of Gaya or the holy city of Puri. At least these two places we know. And he used to say, if I go there, perhaps the memory will come, because his father had that vision when he went to Gaya, that son will be born to him, that the Vishnu will be born as a son. That's why they named him Godadhar. And so Thakur, of course, knew that story. And Puri was connected so much with the birth or the life of Chaitanya Deva and Sri Krishna and everything, that Thakur felt he shouldn't go to those places, that it might be dangerous for him. And he also felt with Rakhal when he went to Vrindavan, because he connected Rakhal with the divine companion of Sri Krishna. And when he heard that he fell ill there, he had that fear that perhaps he'll even give up the body there, not just because of the illness, but the mind will be attracted back to the place where it came from. And Thakur had his attachments. We see that the attachments that these great souls could have are far stronger than the ones that we have. We think they're unattached. Of course, their attachment is not the same. Our attachment has a lot of selfishness behind it, and what will happen to us, this and that. Theirs was a very pure type of love. But from the outside, it looks like a kind of attachment that the Holy Mother had to just about everyone, that Thakur especially to Narendra and Rakhal. And Rakhal was his spiritual son. He had that vision before, so there was really some special connection. Also, Thakur knew that Rakhal, Narendra, and some of the others had a very important role to play in this mission, the reason why Thakur was born, that they were the ones who would help spread his teachings, both in different ways, of course. But Rakhal, we remember Thakur said that he has the intelligence of a king. He could run a whole kingdom. And then Narendra, Swamiji, he said, then we'll call him Raja, he's our king. And he specially made him the first president of Balaram. Swamiji himself didn't want that position. He came back from the West, ready to hand everything over to this Raja Maharaj. So Thakur, for many different reasons, out of his love for Rakhal, out of this fear that he might give up the body, and also knowing that if he did, the reason for his birth would go in vain. So he was worried about his health. So what am I to do now, Rakhal? Please take the prasad from the Jagannath temple. They kept, I don't remember who brought it back, but there was a jar or something kept in his room, Thakur's room in Dakshineshwar. It's a type of dehydrated rice, very hard, crunchy stuff. But Thakur had some special reverence for a few different things. Ganges water, and the prasad from Jagannath temple, and what else? Vrindavan, the dust from Vrindavan, maybe? Yeah, a few things that he really had tremendous faith in this type of prasad that people would bring back from the Jagannath temple in Puri. Even as he spoke these words, the master underwent a strange transformation. He looked at Rakhal with the infinite tenderness of a mother, and affectionately uttered the name of Govinda. This is how Thakur saw him. And Thakur, if he looked upon him as Govinda, that meant he'd start thinking of himself as Mother Yashoda. This is the way his mind worked. This was that Uddipana, and this is that Vatsalya Bhava that always has this paradigm. It always has that ideal example. And Mother Yashoda was the ideal example of this maternal love for God. Did he see in Rakhal the manifestation of God himself? The disciple was a young boy of pure heart who had renounced all attraction to lust and greed, even though he had recently married. And Sri Ramakrishna was intoxicated day and night with love of God. At the sight of Rakhal, his eyes expressed the tender feelings of a mother, a love like that which had filled the heart of Mother Yashoda at the sight of the baby Krishna. The devotees gazed at the master in wonder as he went into deep samadhi. As his soul soared into the realm of divine consciousness, his body became motionless. His eyes were fixed on the tip of his nose, and his breathing almost ceased. The eyes fixed on the tip of the nose, this is something we read about in the text on yoga and everything. It doesn't mean he's looking at his nose. His gaze may be there. That means the eyes may appear as if they're looking inward, but he's not seeing anything. He's not seeing anything because he's in some other world, some other realm completely. So this is just an outward appearance. We read about, and Thakur says, that the look of the eyes of the mother bird sitting on the eggs to hatch them, that they have a faraway, distant gaze because the whole mind is on the future chicks that will be born. So, and we know it can happen when we're daydreaming. Sometimes the eyes are open and we're looking at something but we're not seeing anything. So he's not looking at the tip of his nose, but this is as if. And breathing almost ceased. This would happen when he was in samadhi. They couldn't find even signs of life sometimes. An unknown Bengali, dressed in the ochre cloth of a monk, entered the room and sat on the floor. The master's mind was coming down to the ordinary plane of consciousness. Presently he began to talk, though the spell of samadhi still lingered. Now, generally, any sadhu, any monk came to Sri Ramakrishna, and Thakur would show the greatest reverence and respect. He had great respect for anyone who renounced the world, even if sometimes they weren't the highest caliber of monks or didn't follow the best type of life. Some of them got involved with trying to do miraculous things in curing diseases and all of those things, but still he generally had great respect for them. So there was one sadhu who would get angry all of the time. Thakur would stand the whole time with folded hands before him to show such great reverence so he wouldn't get angry at him. But Thakur must have seen something in this person. Now when Thakur, ordinarily he had tremendous insight, but coming right down from samadhi, seeing somebody, sometimes he would say, in that state, I can see the inside of a person the way one can see objects inside of a display cabinet. So probably because he's coming down from samadhi, he had a greater insight into the character of this person, because we'll find that he's not very flattering towards him. Master, at the sight of the ochre cloth, why this Garawa? Should one put on such a thing for a mere fancy? A man once said, I've exchanged the Chandi for a drum. At first he used to sing the holy songs of the Chandi. Now he beats the drum. All laugh. So perhaps this is someone who had family and a job and everything, and just out of some type of temporary, not very sincere renunciation, put on the ochre cloth. And Thakur must have known something. He's not doing it just saying the ochre cloth. Then he says, there are 3 or 4 varieties of renunciation. That means less than real renunciation. Afflicted with miseries at home, one may put on the ochre cloth of a monk, but that renunciation doesn't last long. Again, a man out of work puts on an ochre-wearing cloth and goes off to Benares. After 3 months he writes home, I have a job here. I shall come home in a few days. Don't worry about me. Again, a man may have everything he wants. He lacks nothing, yet he does not enjoy his possessions. He weeps for God alone. That is real renunciation. Swamiji liked this idea that the renunciation of a beggar is no renunciation, that we have to have something to renounce. So those who, of course, there are exceptions. There are those from their very youth who never get involved in the world. But in general, those who aren't interested in earning anything, aren't interested in education or anything, out of laziness or lack of ambition, and they take to a life of renunciation. What have they given up? Those who have the opportunity to utilize their skill and their learning and could make a lot of money in the world and everything, and they renounce, then he said that's a great renunciation. The renunciation of a king, of a prince, is greater than the renunciation of a beggar. In our order, we have a good number nowadays of medical doctors who could have earned a good living, and so many PhDs and others who really could have been quite successful in the world, had a very easy life, earned a lot of money, and they just didn't care for that type of life. This is a real renunciation. We have others who came from poor homes and didn't have good education, everything. They also may be very, very good monks. But those who take to this life just because they're not happy and it's too much work and everything, that's what Thakur's talking about. We really don't make any distinction. Those who come from a wealthy family and can give it all up, that's one thing. Those who come from a poor family, they may be even better monks. So it's not a question of that. It's really a question of the sincerity. Is it really sincere renunciation? Is it out of longing for realization? Or is it simply out of world weariness? A little bit, that is okay. We don't care for the world and everything, but it shouldn't be escapism. No lie of any sort is good. Thakur must know that this man is not genuine. A false garb, even though a holy one, is not good. If the outer garb does not correspond to the inner thought, it gradually brings ruin. Uttering false words or doing false deeds, one gradually loses all fear. Of course, there are absolute cheats sometimes who take to the Garuda cloth. To rob people even, or very poor people who are beggars, that they find out they can put on the Garuda cloth and they can more easily get alms and go and beg food from people and everything. So they'll do that. Also is found some places. Uttering false words or doing false deeds, one gradually loses all fear. Far better is the white cloth of a householder. Thakur said this many times, Holy Mother also. Because there's no pride in that. There's no feeling that, no, you have to bow down to me, that I've renounced everything, that I'm a sadhu, you're a householder. That pride is a terrible thing. Far better is the white cloth of a householder. Attachment to worldliness, occasional lapses from the ideal, and an outer garb of Garuda, how dreadful. Yeah, we wonder really. Maybe even in Thakur's samadhi, he knew that this man was coming. It's very hard to say. Thakur's samadhi is not our Raja Yoga samadhi. We know that he would see all sorts of things, have all sorts of insights, and who will be coming next, and what their past was, and all sorts of things like that. It is not proper for a righteous person to tell a lie or do something false, even in a dramatic performance. Once I went to Keshav's house to see the performance of a play called Nava Vrindavan. They brought something on the stage which they called the cross. Another actor sprinkled water, which they said was the water of peace. I saw a third actor staggering and reeling in the role of a drunkard, a Brahmo devotee. It was K. We don't know if that really means Keshav or somebody else. It just says it was K. Master. It is not good for a devotee to play such parts. It is bad for the mind to dwell on such subjects for a long while. This is a little bit aside from the point, but Swamiji himself took part in some of these plays. And this got him in a lot of trouble when he went to the West. That this rumor came about, most likely this Pratap Majumdar, he was a member of the Brahmo Samaj, who Thakur actually was very fond of him, and he seemed to have great respect. He was one of the first ones to write something for the Brahmo magazine about Sri Ramakrishna. But he also went to the West, and there was a lot of jealousy between the Brahmos and Swamiji. And we hear that at one point, after Thakur passed away, that they approached Swamiji to see if they could entice him to come back to the Brahmo Samaj and have some very prominent position there. Keshav had passed away, Vijay Goswami had also left, and when they were rebuffed, perhaps they felt that a little antagonism towards Swamiji, and as I say, some jealousy was there. So this rumor was started in the West that Swamiji was an actor on the stage. So that meant he was pretending to be a sadhu, just putting on the garwa, as an actor would do it, trying to cheat everybody. Was it 100% false? No. Swamiji acted in these places, just like our summer camp kids will put on a performance. That doesn't mean that they're deceitful, lying people. But so this was the charge against Swami. Second charge was that he was actually a lawyer. Now, is this completely false? No, he was studying for his law exams before he renounced everything. But see how things can get twisted by devious people. So anyhow, they would put on plays like that. And the members of the Brahmo Samaj would take part in that. And Thakur is talking about these things. Of course, Girish did it. He played all sorts of roles, and what was the story when Girish was playing? Who was it? Some villain or something. And Vidyasagar, I think, saw it and got so upset he took off his shoe and threw it at him or something. And Girish thanked him. This was the highest praise for an actor. Somebody actually believed that what he was saying was taking place. Thakur never seemed to mind that Girish did it. He had plenty of other problems. Another day I went to Keshav's house to see the play called Nimai Sannyas. The Nimai Sannyas, I don't know if this is the one that we all know about. That a very standard play that may not be the same one that the Brahmos put on, but this is one of those performances where you'll see people in tears watching this. It's a highly emotional thing because Chaitanya Dev's mother, I think she had something 10 or 12 sons or children or something, and one by one they died, and then Chaitanya Dev's older brother took sannyas and left the world, and Chaitanya Dev was the only one left. And 24 years old, he had been married once. That wife died of snake bite, then married a second time to Vishnu Priya, and still at that age of 24, after going to Gaya and getting inspired and coming back, initiated by the Ishwar Puri, coming back to Navadvip, he felt that he had to renounce the world and to tell his mother, who had undergone so many bereavements and suffering, and a widow, and would be all alone in the world. This and the songs that were written about this, how when this is performed, you'll see people actually weeping. It's a very moving, touching kind of thing. As I say, I don't know if this is exactly that same Nimai Sannyas or not. Some flattering disciples of Keshav spoiled the whole performance. One of them said to Keshav, "You are the Chaitanya of the Kali Yuga." Keshav pointed to me and asked with a smile, "Then who is he?" I replied, "Why, I am the servant of your servant, Dasanudas. I am a speck of the dust of your feet, Renu Renu." Keshav had a desire for name and fame. It also says, this is mentioned in other places, that Keshav laughed when he heard that. To Amrita and Trailokya, youngsters like Narendra and Rakhal are ever perfect. He wants them to understand that, yes, your Keshav was wonderful. And your Brahmo Samaj, your people, they're okay. They put on these plays and things and everything. I respect them for what they are. But don't confuse them with these young boys. how he would embarrass Narendra when he would tell people, you see, if Keshav has one of these powers, then Narendra has 18 such powers. And he would go on comparing him. And Narendra said, what is this? He's a world famous religious teacher and orator, and I'm just a schoolboy. What nonsense is this? But he wouldn't stop. Thakur knew. Okay, of course he was right. Youngsters like Narendra and Rakhal are ever perfect. Every time they are born, they are devoted to God. An ordinary man acquires a little devotion after austerities and a hard struggle. But these boys have love of God from the very moment of their birth. Nitya Siddhas, they are like the natural image of Shiva, which springs forth from the earth and is not set up by human hands. The ever-perfect form a class by themselves. So we have the avatar. Avatar is also a class by himself, but within, if we make a bigger circle, we'll have the avatars, the Ishvara Kotis, and the Nitya Siddhas. Thakur, he uses these different categories. He likes categories. Even among those who are ordinary souls, there'll be the bound souls, there'll be the ones who are striving. You have these different categories. It doesn't mean that the soul isn't one, that all is the one Atman dwelling within, but just in terms of the jiva, that there are different stages and different categories. So the ever-perfect, the Nitya Siddha, the Ishvara Koti, and the avatars, all share one thing in common, that they're not born because they haven't yet achieved the ultimate goal of life. The theory is that until we have that ultimate realization, we'll still have our karma. That will be the force that causes us to take another birth, and that we'll keep struggling until we have that final realization, and then we'll merge in the absolute, or all different ideas, of course, but we won't be born again. The Buddhists will say we kind of just, the lamp goes out, nirvana. There's some schools. Others will say we merge in Brahman. Others will say that we'll dwell in the company of God. All different ideas, but will not have to be born again. This is the main thing. So these Nitya Siddhas, in theory, should not have to be born again. Either they're born again through some divine will, or they themselves have some desire to work for the welfare of others, or they're bound to the avatar. The avatar comes again, they come again. There's Kalamishak, there's a certain type of aquatic plant, you see, I think it's like water hyacinth, that grows all over and chokes up and clogs all of these rivers, that it looks like they're all separate things, but if you grab one, you pull it, all of the others will come along with it. Thakur uses that illustration. When the avatar comes, all of the inner circle, associates, parishadas, and the antarangas, they all come along also. The ever-perfect form a class by themselves. Not all birds have crooked beaks. What does that mean? He's saying that there are exceptions in this world. Not everyone is born because of past karma. That there are these special souls that come with a certain mission and can shake off that little bit of Maya, and they're born with this love of God, or with this feeling of fearlessness, this feeling of love for all beings, some special features. They're simply born with them. The ever-perfect are never attached to the world. There is the instance of Prahlada. Ordinary people practice spiritual discipline and cultivate devotion to God, but they are also attached to the world and are caught in the glamour of lust and gold. They are like flies which sit on a flower or a sweetmeat, and light on filth as well. But the ever-perfect are like bees, which light only on flowers and sip the honey. The ever-perfect drink only the nectar of divine bliss. They are never inclined to worldly pleasures. Now, Thakur, this example of the fly, and we know, we see flies, they'll go to garbage, they'll go to all sorts of things. He's not saying that people who live in the world are like that. There's a very important distinction between worldly people and people living in the world. That there are many very righteous householders that live in the world that will have some types of enjoyment, but it won't be the equivalent of a fly sitting on filth or anything like that. They'll have their family life, they'll have their careers and all of that, and they'll be righteous, dharmic people, doing everything according to dharma, leading the life of the perfect grihastha, which they're supposed to do. They're supposed to accumulate wealth, artha. They're supposed to have some dharmic types of enjoyments, kama, artha. Thakur doesn't talk about them as flies sitting, he talks about them as people holding on to God with one hand and holding on to the world with the other hand. That's all. And he never criticizes it. But he says a time will come when you'll have this desire to let go of the world with that one hand and hold on to God with both hands. He does consider that something higher. But this is a question of what stage in life we're at and what our adhikara is, what our qualification is. The devotion of the ever-perfect is not like the ordinary devotion that one acquires as a result of strenuous spiritual discipline. This is something spontaneous. This is something that just has to be uncovered. It's already there in full measure. Ritualistic devotion consists in repeating the name of God and performing worship in a prescribed manner. It is like crossing a rice field in a roundabout way along the bulk. Again, it is like reaching a nearby village by boat in a roundabout way along a winding river. Thakur is now talking about what he calls Vaidhi Bhakti and Anuraga. And I'll tell an interesting experience I had, just for fun. It's not going to add anything to what Thakur is trying to tell us, but in 1992, I went to the town of Habiganj in Bangladesh. This was the birthplace of Swami Swahanandaji, and he suggested that I go and visit all of these places, so I went there. It was a very wonderful experience. And from there, there's a village by the name of Baniyachang, and Baniyachang was his mother's village, and he still had relatives there. In fact, the uncle that raised him was still living there, and many other relatives. So part of the reason of my going was to also go to Baniyachang. And it was the dry season. I don't remember, it must have been maybe March, something like that. And so we went, and we had to take a rickshaw, and then we had to go by road, and then we had to cross with this very funny type of little ferry thing where you get in a boat and somebody pulls it with a rope and get to the other side and then take another bite. And it was a long, difficult journey. It took about two and a half hours. The next time I went, this was, I think, the following year, and it was in the rainy season. And they said, we're going to go to Baniyachang. And they said, oh, good. It would be nice to see everybody again. And what do? We get in a boat, and we go straight there. I said, how is it possible? Where was this river before? And then I see that it's not a river. It's flooded land. And it was flooded so much that you could see just the tops of the poles, power poles and things. And what I saw before as a paddy field and little huts, and the huts were raised, now each hut was a little island, and everything was covered with water. It must have been at least 10, 20 feet of water, I don't know how much. So we could go straight. It was the most pleasant journey that we could go at a good clip, and the breeze was there. We came back at nighttime, and then I understood the difference between Vaidhi Bhakti and Anuraga. Vaidhi Bhakti, you have to go this way and that way, follow the path exactly, and then you go to this small little river, and you have to follow every bend in the road, and then the little dirt path, you have to follow each and every step. When there's a flood everywhere, then you just go straight without worrying about anything. So that's this anuraga that he's talking about. So it's, again, it is like reaching a nearby village by boat in a roundabout way along a winding river. That's the other, that's the Vaidhi Bhakti. But when there's a flood, then you can just go straight. Yeah, when the country is flooded deep with water, one doesn't have to follow the winding river. Then the fields are deep underwater. You can row your boat straight to the village. Without this intense attachment, this passionate love, one cannot realize God. Now, this person who walked in with the Garawa, he never says a word. We don't know if he's still in the room. Now, so this Amrita, now he'll ask an interesting question. Sir, how do you feel in samadhi? Now, if it's nirvikalpa samadhi, Thakur will not be able to answer. He'll say what one experiences, you can only know if you experience it yourself. There are no words to describe it or anything. But generally his samadhi is different. We know that. This is bhava samadhi. So many things are taking place in his mind. Master, you may have heard that the cockroach, by intently meditating on the Brahmara, is transformed into a Brahmara, some type of bee or something. We don't know exactly what all these insects are, but the idea is that there's a cockroach out of fear, seeing some insect that can sting it and kill it, gets kind of frozen there, and it gets some metamorphosis takes place and it turns into the other thing by thinking about it so deeply. And anyhow, the idea is that we become merged in the object of our meditation, feel oneness with it. Do you know how I feel then? I feel like a fish released from a pot into the water of the Ganges. Sometimes he says a bird released from a cage. And this is a nice illustration. There's another interesting incident that Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain to M what it feels like. M is asking, what about this meditation on the Absolute? So Thakur gives a very interesting response. He says, one day you can take me to this Matishil's place. They have a big lake there. And people, there's a lot of fish there. They don't fish for them. They're tame. People throw them little bits of bread and things to eat. And he says, you see them darting back and forth with no fear, just enjoying the freedom of being able to swim whenever they want. This is what it feels like. So Thakur is giving a similar answer here. Amrita, don't you feel at that time even a trace of ego? Now the only type of samadhi where there's no trace of ego is nirvikalpa samadhi. The other, it's not this ego that we know of. It's just I sense. This awareness, self-awareness. It's not this ego sense that's connected with the body and the mind and everything else. It'll be different, but still. So, Master, yes, generally a little of it remains. He had no dark, heavy, unripe ego whatsoever. So a little bit of that ripe ego will remain. That means that he may still have the feeling, I'm a child of the Divine Mother, or whatever his attitude is. However hard you may rub a grain of gold against a grindstone, still a bit of it always remains. Or again, take the case of a big fire. The ego is like one of its sparks. In samadhi, I lose outer consciousness completely. But God generally keeps a little trace of ego in me for the enjoyment of divine communion. Enjoyment is possible only when I and you remain. So this was both Thakur's prayer to the Divine Mother and the Divine Mother's plan for him. For him to remain in Bhavamukha, to remain where he can go back and forth, but he won't get merged in the Absolute. And Thakur's prayer, Mother, don't let me lose consciousness. Don't let me get merged in the knowledge of Brahman and that oneness. I want to enjoy the company of the devotees. So this is a state from which the mind can come back down easily. Maybe not so easily, but even At will, we can say, because some eye sense is there. If eye sense is not there at all, then it has to be either some pull of karma or the divine will or something. Lacking that, the mind will remain merged in samadhi and the body will fall off. Not instantly, after 21 days, Thakur says. Again, sometimes God effaces even that trace of I. This will be nirvikalpa samadhi. Then one experiences jada samadhi or nirvikalpa samadhi. These are simply two different names for the same thing. Jada, because one is just like an inert thing. Jadavat. Thakur gives that illustration. Somebody asks, what are the signs that someone has attained this highest state of samadhi? He says that one will be so inert, just like a block of wood, that snakes may crawl over the body and you won't even know it. Birds may land on the head. They may pick out grains from the hair. All of these things happened to him when he was doing his spiritual practices. So neither will be aware of the other. So this is the jada samadhi and nirvikalpa samadhi. That experience cannot be described. A salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean, but before it had gone far into the water, it melted away. It became entirely one with the water of the ocean. Then, who was to come back and tell the ocean's depth? Now, this illustration is used by Thakur in two different ways. One, for those who actually do not come back from samadhi. In his case, if that salt doll became one with the ocean, it could come back to the salt doll again and go back up. And Thakur also talks about we have to dive deep. All of the gems are at the bottom of the ocean and everything. We have to be able to procure all the gems there, and then we can come back up. So this idea of the salt doll, this really applies only to this nirvikalpa samadhi. Otherwise, we can go to the depths of the ocean and collect the gems and come back up. But this nirvikalpa samadhi is some very rare thing. We read about it in our Raja Yoga, and we think a little bit of practice and we'll get it, but it's a very rare thing. And all of these other types of spiritual experiences will be plenty for us. We don't have to think we're missing out on something. If we have that nirvikalpa samadhi experience at the end, or some vision of life, then it's okay. Otherwise, this is reserved for very special great souls. Okay, that was the end of chapter 8. We'll start chapter 9, Advice to the Brahmos. We see in the early days how important the role of the Brahmos was in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, and it was even more important before this. We can say that there were different waves of visitors to Dakshineshwar during Thakur's time. There were the great pundits who came. Then there were all the teachers who came, the gurus who came when Thakur was doing his spiritual practice. And then for a while it was mostly the Brahmos. And then his very close householder devotees and disciples, and then the young boys. And from really 1881, that was really the beginning of when the future monastic disciples started to come. So before that, the Brahmos were very important. And it was because of them, we have to give them credit, because of Keshav's love for Sri Ramakrishna. Keshav had a tremendous, he was free from jealousy. We have to really credit him for that. He had a tremendous zeal in sending people to Sri Ramakrishna, publicizing him. Thakur didn't care to be publicized. He would write things about him in their magazine, and so it was really because of Keshav that many of the direct disciples and others came to Sri Ramakrishna, hearing about that, and they would invite him to all of their gatherings and meetings and things, and so they had a very important role to play in this Ramakrishna Leela. Okay, Saturday, April 7th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was visiting Balaram in Calcutta. This is Balaram Bose. He was, Balaram Basu, he was one of the inner circle Antaranga devotees. We shouldn't think that the Antarangas were all the monastic disciples. There were several householder disciples, M and Balaram and Girish and Ram and others. So he also played a very, very significant role. This was an opportunity for many of the devotees and disciples to see Sri Ramakrishna when he went to Balaram's house. And whenever he went, it was a big occasion. Word would spread from one person to another. They had a little network. Who would tell who, all the nearby devotees and disciples, so they would know when Thakur was coming, and they could all come and see him there. So he was visiting Balaram in Calcutta with Narendra, Bhavanath, Rakhal, M, and others. Balaram, at the master's bidding, had invited some of the young devotees to lunch, so Thakur would also tell him that I'm going, and sometimes he would say, oh, where's Purna, and where's this one and that one, did you call him, and to send for him, and someone would say, oh, I'll go right now, because it was an area that many people, the close devotees, lived not too far from there. Sri Ramakrishna often said to him, to Balaram, feed them now and then, that will confer on you the merit of feeding holy men. That means sadhus. There was a certain type of punya, merit, that people would get. This is why it was very common for wealthy people, especially towards the end of their life, they want to get a foothold, secure a place in heaven or something, so they'll build an almshouse for wandering monks, or they'll build some, dig a well someplace. But this is one of the things that would confer this punya, special type of merit. So he's saying that feeding these young boys, because they were still teenagers, Rakhal and Narendra and others, will confer the same merit as it would to feed somebody who has taken formal vows of renunciation, because Thakur knew that they would. The master looked on his young disciples, yet untouched by lust and gold, as veritable embodiments of God. A few days earlier, Sri Ramakrishna had been to Keshav's house with Narendra and Rakhal to see a performance of the play entitled Nava Vrindavan. Narendra had taken part in the performance, in which Keshav had played the role of Pavhari Baba. Pavhari Baba, Pavanahari, this is the name he was given. No one knew if he ate anything, so they thought that perhaps he lived on air. So then it got shortened to somehow Bhavhari Baba, that he was a very well-known holy man. He had a good position. I think he was an attorney or worked in a court, something like that, and lived all by himself. He lived in the it's hard to imagine. It's a house that had a basement that was half basement and half just a cave. It was kind of just a dugout area. I haven't been there, but people I know have been there. In Ghazipur, it's not far from Varanasi. So he lived down there, and he didn't go out, so nobody knew where he got his food from. So and people would come and seek advice from him, and generally he wouldn't open the door. He would stand on one side, they would ask questions, and he would answer them, and he would spend all of his time in spiritual practice, and was considered a very great soul. They were talking to him, to Sri Ramakrishna about him one day, and somebody said, he keeps your picture in his room or in that cave, whatever it is. And this is when Thakur says, it is just a pillowcase. What is a picture? This outside thing. But anyhow, so he knew about Sri Ramakrishna, had great regard for him and respect for him. There's a whole long story about how Swamiji, after Thakur passed away, went to him and got a little attached to him. And day after day, they would talk and talk about spiritual things. And Swamiji was almost thinking of taking in some type of initiation from him. Then after a while, he found that this Bhavhari Baba was getting more attached to him than he was to Bhavhari Baba. And anyhow, eventually he left. He had some little intervention from Thakur. Why are you doing all this? Did you forget who I am and everything? But anyhow, so this Bhavhari Baba was a well-known person. There are two nice stories about him. One, a thief had come, a few stories. a thief had come and broken into his place and took some pots and pans or something, huh? What happened? And dropped some on the way when he was running, something like that. So Bhavati Baba ran, and he picked up the ones he dropped and tried to reach him and catch him and said, "Oh, you dropped these few things." He had no feeling that I own this and you don't own that. And then I think he was the one, he was bitten by a snake. Huh? Was that him? And somebody said, "Oh, what happened?" He said, "It was a message from my beloved." Huh? I think that was him. But the other story that we know is that one day people noticed a very strong stench, smell coming in, smoke coming out of the house where Bhavati Baba lived. So they broke into it, and they found that he himself had done his own cremation. Probably he was just at the point of death, didn't want to disturb anybody and have anyone have to do that, so he did it for himself, and had done his own cremation, and that's how he passed away. So this is Bhavati Baba. So someone had written a play about him. So Master, Keshav came on the stage in the role of a holy man and sprinkled the water of peace, but I didn't like it. The idea of sprinkling such water on a theatrical stage after a performance. Another gentleman played the part of sin. That is not good either. One should not commit sin. One should not even feign it. The master wanted to hear Narendra sing. The young disciple was not feeling well, but at the master's earnest request, he sang to the accompaniment of the Tanpura. Sing, O bird that nestles deep within my heart. Sing, O bird that sits on the kalpa tree of Brahman. Sing God's everlasting praise. Then he sang, Brahman, joy of the whole universe, supreme effulgence, God beginningless, Lord of the world, the very life of life. And again, O King of kings, reveal thyself to me. I crave thy mercy. Cast on me thy glance. At thy dear feet I dedicate my life, seared in the fiery furnace of this world. My heart at last is deeply stained with sin. Ensnared in Maya, I am all but dead. Compassionate Lord, revive my fainting soul with the life-giving nectar of thy grace. We see a difference in the songs that Narendra sings in the beginning and towards the end. In the beginning, most of them are Brahmo songs. And then later he starts singing more of the songs of Ram Prasad. And surprisingly, many of the songs that Narendra Swamiji sings are from the Vaishnava literature and the Radha Krishna things. We think that he was so much against all of that stuff. But deep down, he had a great appreciation for that path also. Narendra continued, Upon the tray of the sky blaze bright the lamps of sun and moon. Like diamonds shine the glittering stars to deck thy wondrous form. The sweet Malaya breeze blows soft for fragrant incense smoke. The moving air sways to and fro, the fan before thy holy face. Like gleaming votive lights, the fresh and flowery groves appear. How wonderful thy worship is, O slayer of birth and death. The sacred Om, from space arisen, is the resounding drum. My mind craves nectar day and night at Hari's lotus feet. Oh, shower the waters of thy grace on thirsty Nanak, blessed Lord, and may thy hallowed name become his everlasting home. This must be Guru Nanak, huh? I don't know exactly, I have to see. If it is, then these will all be written in Punjabi or Hindi, something like that. Guru Nanak, of course, most of this Guru Granth Sahib are compositions that he himself wrote, and then others as well. But he was well known. One of the many poet saints in India. There's a wonderful tradition that these great saintly figures were all such wonderful poets. There's Mirabai and Tulsidas and Surdas and Guru Nanak, and then of course our Ram Prasad and Kamalakanta and others. That is similar to many of the Sufis. Many of the Sufi saints were also the Sufi poets, great poets. He sang again, in wisdom's firmament, the moon of love is rising full, and love's flood tide in surging waves is flowing everywhere. O Lord, how full of bliss thou art, victory unto thee. Then at the master's bidding, Bhavanath sang. Bhavanath, they say, also had a very nice voice. Where is a friend like thee, O essence of mercy? Where is another friend like thee to stand by me through pain and pleasure? Who among all my friends forgives my failings, bringing me comfort for my grief, soothing my spirit in its terror? Thou art the helmsman who dost steer life's craft across the world's perilous sea. Thy grace it is alone, O Lord, that silences my raging passion's storm. Thou pourest out the waters of peace upon my burning penitent soul, and thine is the bosom that will shelter me when every other friend I own deserts me in my dying hour. Narendra said to the master with a smile, referring to Bhavanath, he has given up fish and betel leaf. This chewing of pan. Master, why so? Thakur wasn't so much in favor of these different types of kind of minor austerities and fasting and giving up different things and everything, that he said, what is the matter with fish and betel leaf? They aren't harmful. The renunciation of lust and gold is the true renunciation. So he went to the heart of things. Then Thakur says, where is Rakhal, a devotee? He is asleep, sir. Now remember, he wasn't feeling well, so we can give him a break here. Master with a smile. Once a man went to a certain place to see a theatrical performance carrying a mat under his arm. Hearing that it would be some time before the performance began, he spread the mat on the floor and fell asleep. When he woke up, it was all over, all left. Then he returned home with the mat under his arm. Who was it? Was it Surendra? One of Thakur's devotees used to come after work and come to Thakur's room and spread out a mat and fall asleep. And somebody fell asleep one time, and then Thakur, everything went on, the singing and dancing and everything, and then that man woke up and he says, has the Paramahamsa come yet? Ram Dayal was very ill and lay in bed in another room. Ram Dayal we know because he was the one who brought Baburam, Swami Paramananda, the first time when he met Thakur. Otherwise, he was a devotee, of course, but it doesn't play a prominent role. The master went there to inquire about him. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, some members of the Brahmo Samaj arrived. The master began to converse with them. A Brahmo, sir, have you read the Panchadashi? Now, what type of stupid question is that? He knows that Thakur, he should know at least, that he doesn't care for books. He never was a reader. If he can even remember how to read at that point, we don't know. He could scratch out something writing, but he was barely able to read and write. We can say that much, and certainly was not interested in reading books. So a really silly question. Master, at first one should hear books like that and indulge in reasoning, but later on, then he sings a song, cherish my precious mother Shyama, tenderly within, O mind. May you and I alone behold her, letting no one else intrude. One should hear the scriptures during the early stages of spiritual discipline. After attaining God, there is no lack of knowledge. Then the Divine Mother supplies it without fail. A child spells out every word as he writes, but later on he writes fluently. The goldsmith is up and doing while melting gold. As long as the gold hasn't melted, he works the bellows with one hand, moves the fan with the other, and blows through a pipe with his mouth. But the moment the gold melts and is poured into the mold, he is relieved of all anxiety. Mere reading of the scriptures is not enough. A person cannot understand the true significance of the scriptures if he is attached to the world. Thakur's view, of course we know, was we read the scriptures at first, we assimilate them, we put them into practice, and then the purpose of it is already been taken care of. And then quoting from something, he says, "Though with intense delight I learnt many poems and dramas, I've forgotten them all, entrapped in Krishna's love." Keshav enjoys the world and practices yoga as well. Living in the world, he directs his mind to God. A devotee described the convocation of Calcutta University, saying that the meeting looked like a forest of human heads. Master, the feeling of the divine is awakened in me when I see a great crowd of people. Had I seen that meeting, I should have been overwhelmed with spiritual fervor, because he sees the divine in everyone. So many ways in which God is seeing this world through so many different pairs of eyes. That'll be his experience. Okay, that's the end of that day. We'll start next time on page 200. That'll be Saturday, April 8th, 1883. We will close with our chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanugham Bhathurvikraham Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Sirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.